Hello, class. This is your final exam review covering chapters 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 16, 17, and 18. In other words, it's covering quizzes 1 through 4. Okay. Understanding oneself sexually and having interpersonal skills and integrity are two characteristics of sexual intelligence. In China, circa 2500 before Christ era, the earliest known sex manuals, called Kama Sutra, were discovered. Philosopher Vatsyayana wrote the Kama Sutra, which is a collection of 7 books on love, pleasure, relationships, and life. Contrary to popular belief, the books dedicate only one chapter to sexual techniques and positions. The manual mostly teaches about culture and traditions and etiquette. Calling a woman a slut to humiliate, intimidate, and degrade her for sexual behaviors that cross the line of acceptable sexual activity is termed slut shaming. Both sexes engage in slut shaming. Slut shaming occurs to express contempt toward a woman, or a woman may exempt themselves from being targeted by slut shaming herself. This term describes a man's inability to maintain sexual arousal within committed, loving relationships. That is Madonna whore complex. As the illustration shows, women's sexuality was polarized between Madonna, a virgin, and Eve, an evil temptress, which evolved into the vernacular MWC. In complete blank, a person neither masturbates nor has sexual contact with another person. In partial blank, an individual masturbates but does not have interpersonal sexual contact. We're talking about celibacy. Many English women chose celibacy to be free of the limitations imposed by marriage and motherhood, to enable them to pursue an education by entering a religious community, and to retain their political power, because if they had married, they would have been subject to their husband's will. Oral stimulation of the penis is fellatio. Fellatio isn't just simply oral stimulation of the penis, but it may involve all the different parts of the penis, which are the glands, the frenulum, the shaft, as well as the scrotum, which is a connecting structure. Primary erogenous zones are naturally sensitive to sexual touch, whereas blank erogenous zones become responsive to your partner's touch over time. Those are secondary erogenous zones. There are actually 14 erogenous zones that have been identified. The most common zones are the armpits, the lower abdomen, the mouth, neck, breasts, buttocks, shoulders, lower back, and the genitals. Other areas that are also sensitive to touch would be the back of the knee, the bottom of the feet, the ears, the hands, inner thighs, nipples, scalp, and the wrist. Oral stimulation of the vulva is termed cunnilingus. Cunnilingus is specifically oral stimulation of the clitoris, labia minora, labia majora, the vestibule, and the vaginal opening. Foods, drugs, and alcohol that can arouse sexual desire or increase capacity for sexual activity is called or are called aphrodisiacs. An aphrodisiastic substance is something like a banana, a peach, a cucumber, but also things like marijuana, MDMA, methamphetamines, cocaine, and things like Viagra. Sexual facial grimaces are referred to as myotonia. Myotonia is both voluntary and involuntary movements. Other than facial grimaces, there are spasmodic contractions of the hands and the feet that occur at the moment of or at the peak of excitement. Muscle spasms also occur during that peak or orgasm. Theorists blank, 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 we're looking for a name, hypothesize that relationship success is influenced by compatibility in styles of loving. We're talking about John Allen Lee. John Allen Lee passed in 2013, but he was particularly renowned for his color wheel theory of love, which uses a color wheel analogy to categorize different styles of love. Short-term loveless sexual liaisons that occur during a brief interval are also known as hookups. Hookups, again, occur without the expectation of a relationship. They're just brief encounters. Oftentimes, they're one-time encounters. According to Mary Blank, secure, insecure, anxious, ambivalent, and avoidant are attachment styles of loving. We're talking about Mary Ainsworth. Mary Ainsworth also passed in 1999. Her most notable contribution to psychology is developing the strange situation procedure that's used in the foster care system. It was designed to observe the early emotional attachment between a child and their primary caregiver. The underlying knowledge that each partner in a relationship cares for the other and knows that the care is blank describes mutual empathy. We're looking for reciprocated. Exposing one's genitals to an unwilling observer is exhibitionism, or this person is an exhibitionist. If you encounter an exhibitionist, the best reaction is a non-reaction, unlike the looks on the women's faces in the photo here. One of surprise or either excitement would be the wrong thing to do. Don't make eye contact, calmly walk to safety and call security. If you're on campus, that would be campus security, or just simply call the police. Blank describes individuals who are sexually, emotionally, and socially attracted to other same sex loving individuals. Additionally, their social and political concerns relate to homosexual orientation. And of course, this is a definition of homosexuality. Okay. All right, this one really isn't a question prompt. I'm going to give you some information about Klinefelter syndrome. Um, as you can see here, the extra, or rather, I should say, the karyotype for someone with Klinefelter syndrome is an extra X chromosome, so it's XXY as opposed to XY. This occurs one in every 2,000 live births. Um, Many male have male sex organs but are sterile. They may have feminized characteristics, be abnormally tall. Um, Otherwise, they're of normal intelligence. Yeah, those are the characteristics of someone who has Klinefelter syndrome. Okay, moving forward. The California Penal Code 261.5 states that sex cannot be considered blank unless participants have given affirmative, conscious, and voluntary agreement to engage in sexual activity. Other violations of the Penal Code include if one of the participants is asleep, unconscious, or incapacitated due to alcohol, drugs, or medication. And of course, that term we're looking for is consensual. Unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature in the workplace, public places, or in an academic setting would be termed sexual harassment. Sexual harassment can affect anyone regardless of gender or socioeconomic status, as well as position. No one really is exempt. Allies and partners can be most helpful to a rape survivor by blank to them. That would be listening. Okay. Blank blank of the human brain occurs in three structures: the hypothalamus, the cerebral hemispheres, as well as the corpus callosum. So we're talking about sexual differentiation. Okay, I'm going to give you a little bit more about sexual differentiation for each of these three structures. In females, the hypothalamus gonadotropin releasing hormone is estrogen sensitive, influencing the cyclic release of follicle stimulating hormones and the luteinizing hormones. The two hypothalamic areas are smaller. The cerebral cortex's right hemisphere is thinner. The corpus callosum is thicker. Okay, now for the male, the estrogen sensitive hypothalamus directs the steady production of testosterone. The two hypothalamic areas are larger in the male brain. The cerebral cortex's right hemisphere is thicker. and the corpus callosum is thinner. All right. According to current research, the belief that the female brain is significantly more symmetrical, meaning it's more effective at communicating, than the male brain is unfounded. Although the hippocampus, which is responsible for learning and memory, is larger in females. The male brain, on the other hand, is 10 to 15% larger overall than the female brain. However, these small differences isn't what's important. What's most important is that the male and the female brains have different wiring, resulting in different behaviors that can be fluid as well as gender specific. So neither sex is more intelligent than the other overall, or more capable than the other. And we are wired differently, so we think and respond to situations differently. Moving on. When an adult molests a non-relative underage youth, it's termed pedophilia. Despite the differences in development between males and females, the psychiatric diagnosis criteria for pedophilia extend the cutoff point for prepubescence to age 13 for both males and females. So, in essence, molesting a young person, a male at 10 and a female at 10, were looked at differently. Now we're able to acknowledge that despite those differences, that we should consider all children under the age of 13 and as teens and adolescents over above that age. So that's a good thing. Easier to argue in cases. This layer of connective tissue is a muscle that regulates the internal temperature of the scrotum. We're talking about the tunica dartos. This is also called the dartos fascia or simply dartos. Stimulation of this small raised erogenous area can trigger strong arousal and intense orgasm, finishing with a female ejaculate. We're talking about the Grafenberg spot or the G spot. Gynecologist Ernest Grafenberg discovered it in the 1940s. Upon further investigation, Dr. Beverly Whipple coined the term G-spot in the 1980s, despite colleagues encouraging the name the Whipple tickle. The blank blank of 1873 was the first U.S. law prohibiting the mailing of obscene materials, birth control devices, and birth control information. That is the Comstock Act. Materials are viewed as obscene when they're produced without literary, artistic, political, or scientific value, patently offensive to contemporary community standards, and the theme must appeal to prurient or salacious interest in sex to be considered obscene. Okay. This definition is not only complex, but it's highly subjective. So it's really hard to enforce. It was hard to enforce back then, and it's no more clear today. Christina has several risk factors for blank blank. That would be age, mutations in the BRCA1 or the BRCA2 genes, reproductive history, dense breasts, personal or family history, the onset of menstruation or the early onset of menstruation or exposure to radiation or the drug DES. If so, we're talking about breast cancer. Um, and if she has several of these factors, then she should schedule a mammography and conduct regular breast exams at home in the meantime. Um, Scheduling a screening with your physician is definitely required after age 50, and they should occur every year. All right. Edward becomes intensely aroused, anticipating intimacy with his college sweetheart. When they embrace, clear droplets are released from the glands of his penis that contain active sperm. Which male reproductive structure releases this fluid? We're talking about the Cowper's gland, which is a pea-sized gland that's located alongside the urethra. And again, it secretes an alkaline fluid during sexual arousal, and that fluid can contain active sperm. Depictions of sexuality produced primarily by women that display mutuality, respect, affection, and balance of power are considered erotica. Erotica is also artistic materials that are, of course, sexually stimulating, but they can be things like this still photo that you see here, paintings, sculptures, film that um, shows some skin. It might even show um, full nudity, but it's done in a very respectful way. And it also may be reflected in music. The accumulation of blood in the three sponge-like tissues, one corpus spongiosum and two corpora cavernosa, are commonly known as the corpus cavernosum. Collectively, these structures are responsible for male erection. Penile erections is the result of a complex interaction of psychological, neural, vascular, and endocrine factors. And the capacity for erections are present at birth, and they continue as long as a man is healthy. Age is less of a factor than health. And the extra credit question, which is going to be worth 12 points as opposed to 7 points, will be in the Hidden in Plain Sight, America's Slaves of the New Millennium. In that excerpt, it talks about the system. I want you to familiarize yourself with the system so you'll be able to answer that question. All right. That is it. I thank you and good luck on your quiz and thank you for being a part of this course.